So the title of today's webinar is Find Your Sanctuary, Create Space for Grace. And we're also, Terry and I have done this a few times now, and he's just, as all of you know, is a real font of wisdom. And there's so much that he has to share with us, and so much we have to gain from it. But we can't get it all into an hour. We're going to do as much as we can in this hour, but there's so much more. And we're going to tell you how you can spend some more time with Terry in a course that he's created called Find Your Sanctuary. We'll tell you more about that at the end of the webinar. But to get started, we want to ask you a question. And just type yes or no in the questions box to this question. Do you struggle with how you can make life-giving choices if your spirit or heart is on empty? Do you struggle with that? Just type yes or no in the questions box there. We got, of course. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, we got one no. All right. More yeses, more yeses. All right, terrific. So lots and lots of yeses here.
Yeah.
Right. Let's try another one. Tell us yes or no to this question. Do you believe your plate is too full and wonder what choices to make if you can't do it all? Do you believe your plate is too full and wonder what choices to make if you can't do it all? So I got some more no's here, some yeses, yeses, a couple no's, absolutely. So this one's a little more mixed. Yes, yes, absolutely, yes, yes. So some more yeses now. All right, let's try one last one. Do you just type yes or no to this? Oh, Maggie said this is tough. It's just yes or no. Yes or no. Do you wonder if you are enough? Just type yes or no in the box there.
And the questions, I will read these, but the questions are really questions I've asked myself. So that was the whole point of this.
Mm-hmm.
When I started thinking about sanctuary, it was connected to these questions for me. And,
all right, so this one's a little more mixed. We've got some yeses and some no's mixed throughout here. Lots of yeses, several no's. I think this is the most mixed one that we've had. All right.
Okay, that's good.
All right, so Terry, you mentioned these are questions you've asked yourself, and so I wonder if you tell us a little more about your story, and tell us about this picture and the story behind it.
Oh, there's my grandma. And if anybody's read my book, they know the story of my grandmother. This is in northern Florida, and the guy with her, that young kid, that cute young kid, looks like it'd be my son, doesn't it? Yeah. Anyway, I was already a young clergyman at this time, so I was knee deep in a lifestyle of trying to make a name, trying to impress in the right way, trying to be productive, trying not to screw up. And the thing about doing all of that is no one ever taught me how to take care of my soul, my spirit.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I was taught how to do a ministry or how to be a successful, but I wasn't taught how to be healthy in here.
Mm-hmm.
So I had written a book about it called Power of Pause with Loyola, and then they came back and said, would you write another book that tells us how to pause?
Mm.
Of course, my thought was, I don't know. But so I thought about it, and the first thing that came to my mind is the story I'm about to read from the book. Now, here's what you need to know. I'm going to read the story, but the picture you're looking at, I didn't know that picture existed until after I wrote this story. Anyway, in the latter years of her life, in the backyard of her home in northern Florida, my grandmother had a porch swing. She liked to sit and swing and hum old church hymns, such as Rock of Ages, Cleft for Me. I can still see her there, wearing a white scarf over her head, a concession to chemotherapy's unrelenting march. When as a young adult I visited her, she would always ask me to sit with her on the swing for a spell. She would pat my leg, and she called me darling. As long as my grandmother lived, in spite of her pain, there was always a place for me on the swing. If I were asked to explain grace, I would paint the picture of my grandmother's swing, because there I never had to deliberate or explain or worry, regardless of the weight I carried. The porch swing in my grandmother's presence bestowed grace without conditions. I'm here today because of that porch swing. I'm here today because of a sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think metaphorically, and so when they said, how do we specifically slow down to pay attention to what's healthy here, right?
Yeah.
How do we do that? What does a sanctuary look like? My first image was this swing.
Yeah.
In other words, because on this swing, I didn't have to prove anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And even if I brought my baggage, whatever baggage I carried at the time, it didn't detract from the fact that I was still, it was okay just to be Terry.
Yeah.
That's the power of the sanctuary.
Yeah.
It's okay just to be Terry.
And I think it's kind of powerful that you had that, I mean, the way you described the story, you paint a picture of that swing and your grandmother there with you. So if we hadn't seen the picture visually, we'd get it in our heads. But you didn't have that picture when you were writing the story.
No, so I'm looking, how you're organizing your stuff that you collect out where you used to keep your car in the garage and stuff, You're moving the boxes around, and in one of the boxes was old slides, and it was this slide.
Yeah.
And she's got the white, because she doesn't have any hair.
Right.
Been through, this is like her third round with cancer. So she's in the middle of a health hurricane in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the wonderful irony and the great gift is that even in the middle of that, she was still a sanctuary for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, let's just check in. I want to let folks know that you're in the right place today for this webinar. If you want a space where you can be replenished and renewed again and again, if you want to be present in your own life, and if you want to find your own voice, this is the right place for you. You're in the right place today if you want to feel glad to be alive every day, and if you want to feel more grateful, if you want your relationships to be affirming and healing, then this is the spot today. Here in this place, on this swing. You're in the right place if you want to learn how to make life-giving choices, if you want to invite more grace into your life, if you want to have peace of mind and feel more re-energized even if your life is hectic. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but we're going to try to put it into 4 major categories. First of all, we're going to talk about why we need sanctuary. And second, we'll talk kind of specifically about what is sanctuary, because like Terry said, it's on one hand it's a metaphor, but it's also very concrete. And thirdly, then how do we find sanctuary for ourselves? And then fourth and final, what will happen? What's the result? What will happen to us when we find sanctuary? Okay, so let's start with that first point. Why do we need sanctuary? And Terry, maybe you could tell us, this is a kind of an image of today's world. Everybody's so scattered and our energy is so distracted and it depletes us and de-energizes us. Why do we need sanctuary in the midst of all that?
So let's just start. The second question is going to be kind of what sanctuary is, but sanctuary is when I'm in the swing. Mm-hmm. I actually am coming home to who Terry is. I'm not trying to be somebody I'm not. Mm-hmm. I'm coming home to that. So we talk about being grounded, or the language I use is being at home in my own skin.
Yeah.
And so why we need it is because, like that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God there wasn't a phone call coming in, because that would
Do you have your cell phone on Do Not Disturb?
Yeah. I'm doing a webinar on sanctuary. Well, just this alone tells you that we now live in a world where more than ever we are distracted.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase that. We are distracted more than ever. We have more things pulling at us. We have to deal with, we talked about the data we have to deal with and consume every day is like a fire hose. Yeah. And we feel, and we assume that multitasking is required as a spiritual gift or something.
Yeah.
And And so we feel bad if we can't juggle all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a perfect image. There are the number of times that we literally walk by each other.
Mm-hmm.
Walk by, and I walk by even my own self to not even catch up.
Mm.
And so why we need sanctuary is because if I'm not my best self, I can't be present for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've said, I say it over and over again when I do workshops, because I do workshops with a variety of people in the healthcare industry and education and in church parish stuff. And the deal is care of any kind, care of any kind, care of any kind begins with self-care.
Yeah. But the problem is it's not just my failure to take care of myself or my own distraction. It's pervasive throughout the culture. So you sort of feel abnormal if you're slowing down or if you're focusing.
Well, that's a great point. So let's talk about, because what I like to say is that this is a paradigm shift. So the webinar, what we're teaching today is a paradigm shift, and a paradigm is basically a set of glasses. It's the way you view the world. Mm-hmm. And so see that picture there? Mm-hmm. That becomes normalized.
Yeah.
And that's normalized in the way we measure our identity. People ask, how much did you get done today?
Yeah.
What did you do? What did you accomplish? Right?
Yeah.
And you got to check all that off, because that's the new measurement. Because God forbid if we had a photo of someone just sitting there on a bench. Because that'd be an interesting image, wouldn't it? Just one guy over there sitting on a bench. And we'd assume the guy sitting on the bench is homeless.
Mm-hmm.
See? That's the irony, is that this becomes normalized. And so I take my marching orders from these measurements about my identity.
Yeah.
So that's why we need sanctuary.
But I think even in church cultures, for those of us who come from a faith tradition and maybe we do volunteer work or we're employed to do ministry, when we just sit on the bench or sit on the swing, we're not actively out, quote unquote, doing ministry. Then at least I used to think that that's selfish. If I'm not spending 110% of myself for whoever out there, then I'm being selfish, taking time for myself.
Mm-hmm. And we know the statistics on this. The number of people who volunteer in any faith organization is what, 20%?
Yeah, ish.
They do the work for the 80 or whatever it is. And there are a lot of people. I end up finding my identity through that sort of pervasive busyness.
Yeah.
And I say that to stop would be selfish, when in fact, the kind of thing I'm doing, I'm worrying about what you think about me. I'm worrying about whether I'm doing enough.
Oh, yeah.
I'm worrying about whether there's going to be kickback, or, in other words, it's very self-conscious.
Yeah.
In and of itself, that's the selfishness. When you get on a plane, the oxygen mask comes down, and what's the security announcement?
Yeah. Breathe for yourself first.
Put your own mask on first. It doesn't say, put your own mask on first, and by the way, that will be very selfish. If you'd like to be selfish, put your own mask on first. Wouldn't that be funny if they did that? But that's exactly what we do in the parish culture. If you'd like to be part of this, put your own mask on. If you want to be selfish, take care of your spirit and your emotional life. But, that's the paradigm shift.
Yeah. And
Jesus faced this. I mean, using his illustration, he faced it all the time, where he would spend time away in sanctuary, replenishing, renewing, filling up. Well, if he could do it, I suppose we could give it a shot.
Yeah, but even then, what we think of as a slower culture, it was still countercultural. The disciples, as soon as Jesus went away, the disciples freak out and they go find him, pull him back to do real work,
Yeah. What I love about that is Jesus is a pretty busy guy. I mean, he's pulled in many, many directions. Yeah. I mean, the pace of that culture, they didn't have Instagram and Facebooks, of course, but however, it's interesting, he was very busy, but he was never in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot find one time when he multitasked.
Yeah.
So that's why we need sanctuary.
Well, you touched a little bit on what sanctuary is. Maybe we could go a little deeper into that and talk about what exactly is sanctuary. When you use that word, what are you talking about, Terry?
Is this where you get the picture of those two chairs?
There you go. Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's the chairs. That's it. Sanctuary is about replenishment and replenishment and nourishment.
Mm-hmm.
When I say nourishment, it's basically in our DNA to be replenished.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because I'm going back to Genesis, bringing this on Genesis, but the Creator created for 6 days, and then the Creator did what?
Rested.
Did these two chairs.
Mm-hmm.
And said, man, that's a nice beach.
You think that's why he created the world, so God could just sit there and look at the ocean?
It said he savored it. It said he celebrated it. It said he enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It said it took pleasure in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in our DNA then to be replenished. In other words, something goes out, I give, so it goes down, and the replenishment allows me to take whatever is in here to be refueled, to be nourished, just like we do with any sustenance that's in our life. This is emotional and spiritual sustenance. That's sanctuary, and it's the thing that goes with that. And we talked about it at the beginning about gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's just being grateful for what is.
Yeah.
Part of the replenishment is, wow, look what I was able to be a part of. Thank you.
Yeah.
Look how I'm able to be grounded here. Thank you.
But when you say it that way, though, Terry, that implies that there's not, like there's not a book I can read with the 12 steps to sanctuary or something. It's like just becoming grateful. It's not like an outline of tasks or something.
Hey, if you want to buy a book, I recommend it. No, see, but that's the interesting thing. What we want to make it a technique.
Yeah, exactly.
That's back to the paradigm thing. Yeah, okay, I'm into it. Terry, I get it. Replenishment, I get it. So what are the 10 steps?
Yeah.
So that I can do them. And if I'm going to do this, I want to be really good at it.
Yeah.
But it's a sanctuary contest.
I want the gold star for sanctuary.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be, with a gold star, you get a gold star, sanctuary gold star. No, I like to say sanctuary sneaks up on us. It kind of happens to us. And it's the same thing that happens if you're trying so hard. Let's say you want to meditate or pray a certain thing, or you do centering prayer. Some people are familiar with that. In other words, but you focus so hard on it, you're not really letting it happen.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's just that's the whole thing. This is not about what you add to your life. It's about what you let go of to make space for what is already there.
Yeah, that's a good insight. What keeps us from doing that? Why is it so hard to just make space? Why do we want to think of this as a technique? What keeps us from getting to our sanctuary?
Okay, that's a great question. That's very personal. And so I wish I had time to answer questions today. You know why it is for me? Because I have somehow bought into the narrative that the busy, productive Terry is the one that's the most liked.
Yeah.
And so there's a part of me that continues to do that sort of thing. And I'm afraid that back to the enough thing. I mean, even with my grandmother, I had to read that story. I read that story because it still gets me. I mean, the fact that my grandmother, she didn't need me to impress her at all.
Yeah.
That's the power of it. And sometimes I'm afraid. I'm afraid to simply be enough. I'm afraid to be loved. I'm afraid to be, well, even think about it. Think about it in Houston. You're down there, right?
Yeah.
And some people, there's all these people coming to help. Yes?
Yeah.
Some people, it's hard. it's hard to receive that help, though, isn't it?
Well, in a way, yeah, because strangers would come up and give us, like one guy pretty much donated his expensive generator to us for the week. And
Really?
yeah, and it was like, I didn't know him. To me, I think my mom might have known him, but she was gone. He's a stranger. He saw we needed help. And I'm like, I want to say, part of me wants to say, oh no, we're fine. And part of me's going, I got to have that generator.
Yeah, exactly. That's the answer to your question of why we don't do it, is because there's something of us that we don't know what to do with grace and mercy.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in sanctuary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty powerful, you know. And I think that when you talk about a paradigm shift, trying to see the world in that new way, you know, it's not, you took off your glasses, you know, but it's not as simple as just changing your glasses. It's a mindset that you got to change, and that's hard.
Yeah, and we do it as a way of intentional practice. This is why we're doing the webinar, why we're doing the e-course, you know, why I do Sabbath Moment every week. It's the intentional practice, the intentional remembering. Yeah. And we do that. I mean, anybody, you know, we're both from a liturgical tradition, and that's exactly what we do each Sunday or Saturday, is we remember. Remember is a powerful word.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember. We remember. We do this in remember. In other words, it's an ongoing liturgical memory.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, so for those of us that are in that kind of a tradition, it's not just about the remembering, but it's a remembering for the future. So what we're remembering trains us for, or you've used the phrase muscle memory. It creates a muscle memory for our acting in the future. And,
yeah, for the next choice we make. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I want to do this. Is there more you want to say, Terry, about what is sanctuary?
No, I think it comes when we talk about the ingredients. So
yeah, okay. So let's do that then.
I love the image, by the way.
Yeah. So let's
even if nobody's in the chair, it still feels good.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. You can almost feel the sand in your toes just looking at it. Well, let's go to that next piece then, the ingredients. How is it that we find sanctuary? What are the components here?
So this is where the sort of the rubber meets the road. This is the practical thing. It's not a list, but this is how you can identify sanctuary.
Yeah.
Like the swing set is the sanctuary. Some people, you know, sanctuary. Some people who are, you know, on the webinar are already imagining where their sanctuary may or may not be, right?
Yeah.
And some people are saying, I'm not sure if I have one. I get that. But the most helpful thing in this section about the ingredients is something I learned in writing the book, Sanctuary. Because I didn't know what the ingredients were. I had to think that through. For example, I know where my sanctuary is. I'm a gardener. You've been to my garden. Yeah. You know where I go to replenish.
Yeah.
And so I had to think about the ingredients. And the first one, and this was like a light bulb moment for me, and that's the word portal, P-O-R-T-A-L. So I live on an island. Love living here. I've lived here 30 years. You only get here by a ferry. When I fly home from the airport and driving back to Vashon, but when I see Vashon, every time I see the island, my heartbeat slows, literally. I get on the ferry and I realize the ferry is not just transportation. The ferry is actually a portal.
Portal, yeah.
A portal is two things. It's a doorway to something and a doorway from something.
Yeah.
So I enter something, I leave something behind. The portal gives me a space, even if it's just a brief space, to enter another place. So first ingredient is portal.
Yeah.
And so bent on the sanctuary part, I missed the portal. The portal is the invitation.
Yeah.
We have all kinds of examples of great portals. Let's talk about a little one. In liturgy, what's the way that we begin our liturgy? The Lord be with you.
Yeah.
Right? Or even a prayer, the Lord be with you. So what is that? It's a portal.
Yeah.
Something behind, but now we've entered a different space.
Yeah.
And a portal,
when you say that about the example of the liturgy, the Lord be with you, I'm thinking about so many presiders who don't completely understand that idea of portal the way you're talking about it, and they change or add to that greeting. So instead of the Lord be with you, they'll say good morning or welcome or something like that, because they're in a different space. They're not thinking about it as a portal. But when you use the liturgical phrase, as you said, that's an invitation to a different kind of place.
Yeah, and so the portal, so my great teacher in this, and I wrote about it in the book, is a woman named Betty. Went to her garden. She's a dear old woman. She's I don't know, 80s or 90s, and I didn't want to ask, but she was one of these. She's just still a ball of fire. She had raised 8 kids on a boat in Alaska. I mean, this is a woman you don't want to mess with. So anyway, she says, "I want to show you my garden." I said, "Great." So I go over to her garden, and it's a jumbled mess, you know. And I'm thinking, "Good Lord, woman, I can help you here." And
this is what you do.
What I do. Yeah, I can fix this for you. This is sad. And because the pathway, you couldn't hardly walk on it. So she says, "I want to show you my special chair." And I said, "Good." So we go back to this wicker chair, and she says, I call that when the world pisses me off chair. So I'm thinking, man, I could sell those. That's a great one. She says, "Whenever the world gets to me, I go to my chair." And I'm thinking, of course, that's sanctuary, right?
Yeah.
That's sanctuary.
Right.
So I'm thinking, but why is it so messy getting to your sanctuary? So we're going back on her little pathway, and I'm about to help her and fix her garden. She says to me, "Did you notice all the plants along the pathway?"
You couldn't walk through them.
I said, yeah. She said, "Well, I'm glad you did, because they're all herbs." And she wears blue jeans, and she says, "By the time I get to my chair, I smell like herbs because it's all rubbed against my jeans." Boom. And then it hit me.
Yeah.
The herbs were her portal.
Yeah.
See? Yeah. It wasn't just the chair you're going to.
Right.
She's doing this the whole way with the herb. Yeah. In other words, this is basically her, "The Lord be with you."
Yeah.
It's her shift to that space. Because what a portal does to you is it puts you in a frame of gratitude.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here, not there. Gratitude.
Yeah.
And portals, one lady said, she says, "Okay, I get my sanctuary is walking with my friend. We walk 4 miles a day, my friend and I. That's our sanctuary." I said, "That's great." She said, "I realized I so love our walk. When I'm tying my shoes on our bench right by my front door," she said, "tying my shoes is my portal."
Oh, wow. So something that small.
Yeah, it's just exactly something that small, something that specific. In other words, it puts me in a different space. Yeah. So my invitation to people is look for your portals.
Well, I'm wondering if folks on the webinar, if you're hearing us talk here, if you're thinking about your portal, if you want to write in and tell us about a portal that you recognize in your own life, and we'll share that with everybody. Just use the questions box there to write that in.
Yeah, and I'll give a couple other examples, because the woman who's my editor for the book, I thought she was pretty, I call her pretty well advanced in the whole subject of prayer and meditation and spiritual life, so I figured she didn't need this. And she talked about when she gets home from work, she and her husband get home about the same time, Chicago area. She goes to her chair in her room, he goes to his chair in his room for their own little private detox, you know, their 30 minutes. She says she has her glass of wine, and she says she didn't realize that's her sanctuary, but she says, as soon as she walks in the room, her cat, she has a cat, he has a cat, her cat jumps into the chair. So it's basically her cat is the portal.
That's great.
Yeah. I like this, ringing the chime, attending college baseball games. Yeah.
Yeah. So people are writing in there. Andy says ringing the chime before meditation is his portal. Linda's portal is attending college baseball games. Gina's portal is, it's often my car drive to meet my friends for a run. Dave says my portal is getting out of the concrete jungle and into nature.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I love hearing people talk about portal. I had one guy came to one of my events, and he says to me after the break, he said, "Can I tell you my story?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "I'm not a spiritual guy. I don't like this stuff." I said, that's okay. That's fine. He said, the only reason I came is because my wife told me to. And I said, that's okay.
That's a good reason.
And he said, because he said, I don't understand this stuff. I don't understand. I said, that's okay. He said, I'm retired. My thing in life is model trains. Has a big model train set in the basement of his house. And, you know, the kind with the village and the mountains and the trees and stuff. So he said, every night after supper, I go mess with my little model train set, big model train set. And he said, as I open the basement door, I turn the light on, and the light shines just on the model train. And he said, I realized, listening to you today, that the light on the model train is my portal.
Mm-hmm.
I said, dude, I'm glad you're not spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing to me.
Yeah, example of a portal for me is a sanctuary space for me is cooking. When I'm cooking, I feel
Right.
about sanctuary. So in my kitchen, I have a candle that I light right before I start cooking, and that's the, you know, the sort of, in fact, I do it on purpose to remind me that, you know, I'm entering sanctuary space now. It's not just making food, but it's a,
And I love, and your phrase is a perfect one, on purpose. I do it on purpose.
yeah,
I get on the ferry on purpose. I tie my shoes on purpose.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's on purpose.
Maggie says, I have a walking bridge to my apartment that leads to my front porch and my door. So she's equating bridge and portal there.
I love that, actually.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Mine is music. My portal is out in my garden, which is down below me here in my office. But when I go out in my garden, and either I'm going to wander or sit in the chair, but I turn the music on. When the music's on, it's sanctuary time.
Yeah. Well, tell us, Terry, when you're, this is going to sound weird, but, you know, like, how do you know you're in sanctuary? Like, how do you know you're doing it right? You know, or how should we not be afraid of doing it wrong? Is maybe a better way of saying
it. I don't know if there's any way to do it. I don't think that should be the goal. Right. I think just being in sanctuary, let that be enough.
Mm-hmm.
I told a story once about my first time at a Benedictine monastery. I went to see my spiritual director. I'd never been to one before. Didn't know what the deal is. And so I was going to go for 3 days, and I was going to have this phenomenal 3-day retreat, right?
Yeah.
High bar for what I needed to have happen. I figured while I was there, I mean, that 3 days is a long time to have a little spiritual retreat, but I figured while I was there, I would read like 7 books, you know, write like a dozen sermons, homilies, you know. While I'm there, I might as well get some stuff done. You know what I'm saying?
Of course. Yeah.
So it'll be a very productive one. And so I meet my spiritual director at lunch, and he says, "What are you here for?" I said, "Man, I'm here to do it's kind of a Sabbath retreat." He said, "Oh, wow, that's great." And so I go back to my room. He sees me at supper, which is 6 hours later. And he says, "So how's your Sabbath retreat?" And I said, "Ah, man, I think I kind of screwed up already." He said, "Man, you screwed up your Sabbath retreat." He said, "I don't understand that." Is that like a Protestant thing? I mean, what's going on? And I said, "Well, I had so much to do." I went back to my room, I laid down, and I fell asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I woke up 15 minutes ago. I slept the entire afternoon.
Yeah.
And he laughed and laughed, which is, I think, the purpose of spiritual directors.
To laugh at you.
To laugh at you. Because he said, "I'm so glad you fell asleep." He said, "Because if you'd been awake, you'd have been so busy, you wouldn't have heard God speak anyway."
Mm. Mm.
He said, "Well, while you slept, you'll be glad to know that God hugged on your neck." So what I loved about that was my whole assumption about what success was going to look like. I need to let go of that.
Yeah.
I need to let go of that.
Yeah.
So I do know that when I'm in sanctuary, I'm going to have all the stuff that comes at me. Like, am I attentive enough? Am I slowing down enough? Am I paying attention enough? Am I doing all the things enough? Mm-hmm. And that's why Betty was also very helpful. The other ingredient to sanctuary is our senses.
Yeah.
That what Betty did was she grounded herself with what she could see, hear, taste, touch, and smell.
Oh, yeah, so it makes it right in the present moment then.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So it brings you right here, because typically all the things that bombard me are something that has to do with later on or the
Yeah,
past.
yeah.
Well, the senses always just bring you right to this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever it may be, even if I nod off to sleep,
Yeah,
well, okay, that's what that is.
yeah,
And so I have people do it differently. Some people in their sanctuary, they want to read something, they want to write something, they want to walk, whatever it is, that's fine. And some people just, they let all that go. And
yeah.
I don't really have any rules about that, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not about, it's not about playing the rules with sanctuary. It's
Mm-hmm.
simply about creating the space where I come home.
Yeah.
And if I let go of the need, I tell people my wish for you is that you screw up at sanctuary. Give yourself the permission to screw up at it,
Yeah.
because that then truly makes it a sanctuary.
Well, when you say it that way, it reminds me of something you said in your story about your grandmother, on the porch swing being the sanctuary. But you said, even if you bring all your baggage, all your emotional stuff, all your issues, and that's in your sanctuary with you, it's still a sanctuary. It's not like the perfect Terry shows up for the porch swing event.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here, let me leave this stuff outside while I come in.
Yeah. Well, I think of my own life, and that just makes it, that's like permission for me to just, like you keep saying, to be me without having to, do some self-improvement course before I can attain sanctuary.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And because the part of it is there's a part of sanctuary which is actually making peace with all the stuff that bombards me.
Mm-hmm.
The anxiety or worry from yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and the anxiety and stress for tomorrow.
Yeah.
To make peace with that is really what sanctuary helps me do.
Yeah. You mentioned, when you were talking about the senses, you were mentioning about how that grounds us in the present moment. And just now you said that the anxiety is usually stuff that has to do with what's in the past or what's coming up in the future. Say more about that idea of present moment. How do we, what's your idea of that present moment?
Yeah, it's actually the phrase that I like. I didn't use it when we were talking about what is sanctuary, but it says, my favorite phrase is one from a priest in the 1700s. And I now use it, and I don't give him credit.
You pay him copyright fees to.
Anyway, his name was Jean Cassade. But anyway, the phrase is the sacrament of the present moment. I love that.
Yeah.
And sacrament is, of course, the visible presence of grace. Well, that's what my grandmother was. So the sacrament of the present moment. And it's literally to be, like the little boy said to his mama, "Mama, listen to me, but this time with your eyes. Be here. Be here now." Now, there's stuff I may or may not like about now, but if I'm here now, the anxiety has less sway over me. Less sway. It's still real, but it has less sway.
Yeah. There's another phrase that I've heard you use that I think is really powerful too, and I always mispronounce it. It's Kayem or KM.
Yeah, it's a Celtic word, KM, pronounced KM, but it's spelled with a C, C-A-I-M, C-A-I-M. And the Celtic spirituality was in the British Isles, and in Scotland, in the island of Iona, which is still alive and well today. Some people know of it. And KM was, whenever before prayer, they would draw literally with their finger, draw a circle around them. And KM is the invisible circle of safety, of God's protection. It's the circle of safety.
They'd literally do that with their finger? They would draw
that with their finger.
Wow.
And I have a friend who does that. He literally does that in his space, yeah. And because I'm in a safe place, which is really, we go back to the swing set. I'm in a safe place. I'm safe.
Yeah.
And I mean, sanctuaries, think about sanctuaries relative to the hurricane. people who were able to get to refugees, not refugees, but is that what they call them? But
Uh, uh, yeah, some kind of care center or place
yeah,
where that actually happened to my folks. They got rescued at 3 a.m. from their home in a boat.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was just some neighbor. He was going around rescuing people and taking them to his home, which was the safe place in that neighborhood.
Well, this is the other thing. I mean, this is the corollary maybe we haven't talked about yet, but the fact that we can be all of those things then for somebody else.
Oh, say more about that.
Well, that I can be that swing set, and basically the KM, I'm the portal. The boat is the portal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
KM is the place of safety.
Yeah.
And I can be those things for someone else.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and if we play off of what you're saying before about, you know, your whatever stuff we have going on with us, our baggage, our imperfections, our brokenness, we can still be a place of safety for others. I mean, we have to be. What's the alternative? If we're waiting for the perfect person, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, I can't imagine finding sanctuary with the perfect person. that would be scary.
Yeah.
No, I think that the power of the more comfortable you are with your own skin, the more at home you are,
mm-hmm.
the more extraordinary you'll find people drawn to that.
Yeah,
it's a powerful thing.
Yeah,
I love being around people who are at home in their own skin.
Yeah,
yeah, it's a big deal.
Well, let's talk about what's going to happen if we do this. Like, suppose that we can get more comfortable in our own skin. Suppose we can draw that circle of safety around us. Suppose we can identify our portals and move to a place of sanctuary. What's going to happen to us, and what's going to happen to our friends and our world?
Well, I think one of the things is I don't. If I'm more comfortable, if I find this is back to the muscle memory thing, right?
Uh-huh.
That if I'm practicing this more and more, I find that I don't clutch as tightly to all those other things that I needed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't clutch as tightly to anxiety, and I don't clutch as tightly to worry, and I don't clutch as tightly to the baggage I carry, either to impress or to be impressed. I don't need to hold it as tightly. It's not as important to me anymore.
Yeah.
I don't need that one right now. I can.
Well, then I think what happens is when people encounter you, then when you're not clutching, or counter me when I'm not clutching as tightly to that stuff, somehow there's like more of an invitation or an openness to me, because I'm not so focused on my own stuff. I can actually pay attention to what's going on in the lives of those around me.
Yeah, and the paying attention is a big deal, because paying attention is only possible if my energy, my mind and energy is not given to something else. So like you said, if my energy is given to how many bags I'm carrying, I'm not really there.
Yeah.
And so I find that's the second thing that will happen is I find that really when I encounter someone, I'm literally there for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
I hear, I see. I don't prejudge.
Yeah.
I find that happens in sanctuary. And then the third thing that happens is the healing, it's like I'm comfortable now making that space available for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not on some race to be perfect myself.
Yeah.
I'm just at home, and if I'm at home, guess what? Hey, y'all come.
Yeah. Well, I think that propagates too. So if people encounter us that way, it gives them permission to let go of their anxieties, to begin their healing process. And then over time, that becomes, I think, an antidote to that cultural need to be distracted and busy all the time. It can be healing not just for us, but for the whole world.
Antidote. That's a great word, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yes, it's an antidote. It's actually what it is. And the more you do it, you'll find the antidote, just like any good medication that you're taking for the benefit for something. All of a sudden one day, like if you're taking a sinus, all of a sudden one day you're breathing and you didn't know why or how. You're just breathing.
Yeah.
The antidote starts to take effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like
Well,
it.
that's kind of, I think when we started this conversation, I was kind of thinking about, sanctuary for me to make my life better, which is, I think that's important. Like we said, self-care is important, but we were saying you said at the top of that, in order to be able to care for others, you have to care for yourself first. But once you've cared for yourself, then you're able to care for others, and that becomes an additional benefit or an
It
additional outcome.
spills. It literally spills from what you're doing.
Yeah, I like that.
Or using the New Testament metaphor, it shines. The light shines. It spills. The light shines.
Yeah.
I mean, no boundary to where the light shines.
Yeah.
But the thing about the light is the only reason you can let it shine is don't put the bushel on it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the same thing we said earlier. Get out of the way. Let go of the bushel of whatever, distraction and worry and anxiety and stuff.
Yeah. That's
I like this picture, by the way, of this kid. See, there's what will happen when we find sanctuary? You'll be glad to be alive. That's the paradigm shift I want to make with people. Sometimes when I meet people, I don't say, what do you do or what did you do this week? I say, tell me when you were glad to be alive this week. Because we don't ask each other that question.
And the thing about children, and one reason that we picked this slide is that the thing about children is they come preloaded with these skills to be glad of life.
Exactly. It's in their DNA.
Anxious, and we those skills are all still inside of us, right? We were born with them, but we've somehow muted them or tamped them down in such a way that it becomes, we even talk about it as being too childish.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? They start with the DNA of sanctuary and being fully alive, and we say, don't worry, by the time we're done with you.
You'll be educated and productive when we're finished.
You'll lose that sense of joy. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We'll take care of this.
So what we've been talking about today, as we said, we tried to marshal all this under 4 big categories: why we need sanctuary, what sanctuary looks like, how we find and create sanctuary, and how much better off we in the world is going to be when we discover sanctuary. But there's a lot more that Terry has to say on this. So if you want to go even deeper, I'm going to ask him to tell you about this online training program that he's offering.
Yeah, some know about it. This is I do an e-course on pausing, but there's this other e-course that I just did once now, and this is the second time, called Find Your Sanctuary, which takes the book Sanctuary that I read from, takes all the things we just did, but it's divided into 4 weeks. There's 3 sessions each week, but it gives you, there's 2 things that happen. One, it gives you stories so that you can work through this at your pace with reflections. What does this look like for me in my world? The second part of this, which I love, is that there's and I never remember how to call it. What do you call it where we talk to each other? Chat room like a thing.
Dialogue, chat.
Yeah. Anyway, so that we actually converse with each other as we're taking the course. We share thoughts and we share photos. I love that part too. And so you can see what other people are working through, and that triggers stuff because your word permission was a big word. We give each other permission. And so this is designed for you to go at your own pace, or you can go with everyone else. It starts in October. And it's just an opportunity to give yourself permission to be serious about this, to make it important. Yeah. And there's what I love about there's some of the lessons, if some of the lessons really hit you, then you can go back to it. Just part of your deal. Yeah.
And tell us about some of these things folks are going to learn in the course here, Terry.
How to make, did we write these down or something? How to make life-giving choices if you're, well, it's the questions we asked at the beginning, yeah. So the thing about the life-giving choices is you'll find that as you're replenished, you have the capacity to make choices. I find that when I'm not replenished, I react to things. I don't proact, I react.
Yeah.
Everything's this. It's like the beach ball I let out of the water, just boom. And so if I'm giving myself an opportunity for reflection, contemplation, and the grounded me makes better decisions. Yeah. And the irony is this is like adding something else to your life, adding a class to your life. Isn't this like adding more to your life? Well, in a sense, it kind of is. But it's a choice that allows you to be more intentional about everything else that you do.
So the structure, the actual physical structure of this class is going to be live calls and, like you said, sharing reflections, conversations, sanctuary photos, and you've offered 2 ways. You can go at your own pace, or you can kind of keep up with everybody else and go through it as a group, right?
Yeah, if you see a sanctuary photo from somebody you really like, you can call them and say, "Would you come to my city and build that for me?" Or you can get. We should have Betty sell her "When the World Pisses Me Off" chair.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah.
That'd be good.
All right, and then
yeah, I'll be in the course. I will be in the course, live in the course. I'll be taking each one of and I literally will be taking each one of the episodes, going through them, in present time, and I will be in the chat room, talking, discussing, responding. So yeah, I actually enjoy this very much, because part of doing the e-course, literally, this is literally true, is I do it because I want to practice this for me personally.
Excellent, excellent. All right.